On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will always have the courage
All right.
to hold myself.
Welcome to episode number 56 of the On the Blue Line podcast. We call this Monday Morning Roll Call, and I am your host and the founder of On the Blue Line, Wayne Mulder. This week, Living Your Epitaph. Monday Morning Roll Call starts now. So this is going to start out on a somber note and then transition into a little bit more humor and then end on a serious note. So, in the last couple weeks, in the last days, there's been a lot of talk of death, right? There's been a lot going on with this virus, who's being targeted with it. I know originally they had said it was just older and those with pre-existing health conditions. And then obviously we're seeing younger and younger people my age, that are passing away from this. And some of them are law enforcement officers. In fact, just a couple of them showed up in my news feed right when I was preparing to do this. So, and with all this talk, there's always fear and uncertainty. And uncertainty by itself will often breed fear. And that's what kind of happens is people don't know where to turn and they become quite concerned, and oftentimes for good reason. And there's going to be a human cost associated with this, and there's going to be a toll that's associated with this as well. But what I wanted to talk about is, as the subject of death, which is a hard conversation to have, right, for most people. And if you've been following me for any length of time, I talk about how for law enforcement officers, it's a little bit more common. In fact, oftentimes we use humor and so forth to combat it because it's more common for us to go to scenes where someone may have passed away or to deal with death more so than the general public. However, the thought and what came to me as I was thinking about this and thinking about the loss that's going with this, the first thing I want to say there is one good thing, and I've mentioned in some of the Mulder Minutes, is make sure that when you hear these news stories, when you're seeing what the media is pushing out, that you're taking a look at also the positive side as far as the number of people that are recovering. Because when you look at the statistics and see the number of people that are fully recovering versus those that have not made it for one reason or another, it's a much different feeling, a much different way of looking at it. Don't misunderstand me. There's still an absolute cost to those whose loved ones have passed away, but there's hope out there also when you see the statistics. But that's not what I want to talk about. What I wanted to talk about was this idea of an epitaph. In other words, what is an epitaph? Let me start there for you. Well, really, it's a phrase or a form of words written in memory of a person who have died. Most commonly, we see them on stones. It can also be something by which a person, time, or event will be remembered. And that's what I want you to think about. So in researching this, I'd come across a couple sites, which I will link up in the show notes. And then also, if you're watching this on video, I will show some of them up here on the screen for you. But there's a couple sites that have gone through and have put different grave markers and stuff out there that have some humor to them as well. There was a Gabriel Williams that had passed away. It appeared to be a younger person. And so on the back, they have a gymnast and an AC/DC sticker. So I guess they wanted to combine his two biggest passions, which was gymnastics and rock music. It's interesting. You'll definitely have to check out a photo of it. There was this person by the name of Kay. We don't know specifically who Kay was, but Kay's fudge recipe is given on her tombstone. So you can actually follow it, get the chocolate, the butter, the milk, and follow the recipe here on her tombstone and make her fudge. According to this, people have done it and they were unimpressed. But what can I say? People will put all sorts of things on their stone. There was an Andrew Olzlak, and he put on there, "Abandoned in old age by wife and children. May God be more understanding and merciful." I guess he wanted to make a point to his family after his passing. Rodney Dangerfield famously has on his stone, "There goes the neighborhood." And that was something that he apparently wanted to leave them laughing after he passed. And it goes on and on. Some people have lengthy ones. It used to be commonplace to put the cause of death on a gravestone. So this one, "Lost life by stab in falling on ink eraser, evading 6 young women trying to give him birthday kisses in office, Metropolitan Life Building." That's probably a unique way to go. And it goes on and on. Nathaniel Grigsby, which has quite an interesting historical portion to it. "Through this inscription, I wish to enter my dying protest against what is called the Democratic Party. I have watched it closely since the days of Jackson, and know that all the misfortune of our nation has come to it through this so-called party. Therefore, beware of this party of treason. I think he makes his point fairly clear, even upon death, as to where he stands. But there were others on the other side of the fence. In fact, one of my favorites, if I can get to it here, was essentially telling people to not stay long if they were not a Democrat. And on it goes. All sorts of different ones. I'll link this up and you can look at it later. But my point with all this, and what I really wanted to drive home is, people put epitaphs on stones for different reasons. Sometimes they do it in humor. Sometimes it's family and them wanting to say how they remember this person. And then sometimes it's the person themselves prior to their death saying, hey, this is how I want to be remembered. Regardless of how you look at it, what I want you to consider is this idea of it's an obvious but sobering thought, but you will be remembered for how you live. Right? I mean, ultimately, we all will be. And if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you are, for all intents and purposes, alive. Which means you still have an option. I still have an option. We still have an opportunity to portray, to become the person that we want to be, and to help to define how we want to be remembered. So, less about an epitaph from what's on a stone, but more about a memorialization of our life. More about how we will be remembered. And, there's different things that people sometimes will think of others after they pass. Sometimes an epitaph that defines you perfectly. Maybe Jim was compassionate and loving and made a difference in thousands of lives. Maybe Bruce was a mighty warrior and a fervent believer of the good in people. Sarah had a heart for all mankind and never knew a stranger. Those little simple quotes could define a lifetime of trying to make a difference in other people's lives, right? So when you think of these quotes, what would you want a summary of your life to say? What would you want it to say about you? What are the descriptors that you would use? One way, when I was thinking about this, is you could almost say, consider your life mission. So if you don't have one, I would suggest maybe starting there. It's kind of a draft, a life mission statement. So what is a life mission statement? Well, it's very similar to a business mission statement, right? It's a summary of what your mission is, what you're here to accomplish, what your goals are. It can define and have included in there your core values, have in there what is important to you, have in there what your mission is on this earth. And if you haven't taken time to do that, I would suggest you consider maybe putting pen to paper or finger to keyboard and come up with some ideas and put those ideas out there and say, okay, this defines what my mission is, what I want to do. Once you've taken time to do that, another suggestion is run it by some people, run it by some loved ones, run it by good friends, run it by people that you trust who can give you some feedback and they can tell you, hey, yes, this mission is in line with your talents. When I thought about like my brother and sister or other people in my life, I could help them because I know them well enough that I kind of know their strengths and their weaknesses. I know where their heart is fullest and where they're operating in their sweet spot. And your family and your friends and loved ones know the same about you. So once you've taken a little bit of time and you've kind of come up with a life mission statement, run it by them. Get some ideas on what they think your statement is. And you may be thinking right now, listen, I'm a cop. That's my life mission. I help other people. I go out there and I get that. And I can be very much the same way. But it's so important to take time to think about what our mission is in life in general, because you're more than just an officer. You're more than just a dad. You're more than just a mom. And because you encompass all these areas and you probably have seeds of things that you want to accomplish that have been planted on your heart a long time ago, and defining what that mission is in your time that you're given on this earth can be so powerful. But the other thing is if you think about that, as being kind of your mission, or if you want to be more somber about it, say your epitaph, then what are you doing to live that out each and every day? Right? That's the important step. That's what we want to do. We want to define what our mission is on this earth and what we hope to do. And then we want to take the time to live that out each and every day so that we become known for it. Once the plan is drafted, what are you doing to live it? What are you doing to embody the things that you say you believe? The reality is that nobody knows how much time they have on this earth. Nobody knows the day or the hour that they're going to be called home. And you have a responsibility to live out your epitaph, to live within the summary of your life, the phrase that sums up the weight of who you are and what you brought to this world. The reality is that you don't know and may never know the true power of that. It's kind of the same way you've heard the poem and the other people talk about the dash on a stone. You have the date of birth, and then you have the dash, and then you have the date of death. And how that dash summarizes that person's life. That we don't see it when we look at a stone because we don't realize that what that dash really represents is everything else. It represents life. It represents the good moments and the bad moments, the failures and the successes, the tears and the joy. All of that is encompassed in that dash. And in the same way, a well-written mission statement, a well-written epitaph, something that describes your life in summary, can be the same. It's not going to show, it's not going to represent everything you've ever done, but it will represent the mission that you believe you are here for and what you tried to do in order to fulfill that mission. So how will you be remembered? I hope it's decades and decades, years and years before you or I, before we ever have to think of this for either of us. But think of what a difference those years will be if you live within the purpose of your life starting now. Think of something like this. Think of Jim was an exemplary officer. He was a warrior, but he embodied compassion and empathy. Jim made a difference in the life of every person he came into contact with on and off the job. Jim was an example not of perfection, but of humanity guided by divine intervention and inspiration on a mission to make a positive difference in the lives of everyone he knew. Jim fulfilled his mission. That does it for this week's Monday Morning Roll Call. I'll see you next Monday at Roll Call. And in the meantime, I'll see you on the Blue Line.